Welcome back to Divorce Talk Show. I'm Lori McShane, a certified divorce specialist in California real estate. And today, we're discussing the intricacies of custody and co-parenting post-divorce. During our discussion, we'll touch on compelling topics like the role of a 730 evaluation in custody and divorce proceedings and the emotional impact divorce has on children. These are critical topics that resonate deeply with families navigating these challenges. And I'm thrilled to welcome an incredible panel of experts who will share their insights and real-world experience with us today. We have Donald Schweitzer, Managing Partner at Schweitzer Law Partners, specializing in family law. Karen Darling, a family law attorney who specializes in minor counsel. And we have Dr. Kim K. Shirin, PhD, a licensed marriage and family therapist with a doctorate in clinical psychology and neuropsychological assessment. Let's get started. And don't forget to visit divorcetalk.show to submit topics for future episodes. So let's start the show off by discussing the 730 evaluation. Dr. Shirin, can you explain what a 730 evaluation entails and how it influences custody decisions?
Sure. Well, a 730 child custody evaluation is an investigative report for the court to be able to understand what's going on in the family. So it involves lots of different aspects of the family, and that is, it's going to look at the history of what's gone on. It's going to look at the psychological functioning of the family. It's going to look at the emotional functioning of the family, the physical things that are going on. Talking to the people who have had interactions with them, had a chance maybe to observe them and interacting with their kids. Or maybe it's the babysitters, or maybe it's the soccer coach or the school teacher. So you get to see who's involved and what part's going on. Then you taking all of that information, and that you're trying to synthesize that into a coherent report where you're going to go through and help the court understand what are the dynamics of this family and what does this family need to be able to create a high functioning children. And that's what we do in a 730 evaluation.
Okay, and Karen, as an attorney specializing in minors counsel, how does the 730 evaluation factor into advocating for the best interests of the child?
Okay, well, like Dr. Shirin said, the whole purpose is to provide the court with the information that it needs to be able to create an environment that this child can function and be a high-functioning child. And the purpose and the underlying motivation, for lack of a better word, is that we're trying to find out what is in the best interests of the child, because that's what the court's looking at. And so what the evaluator is going to do is they're going to present any psychological testing that's necessary. They're going to talk to the child, get the child's perspective on everything that's happening in the family dynamic, what the conflicts are and how they're affecting the child. They're also going to be looking at the time that each parent spends with the child, because that's going to be a factor as well. So since the whole purpose behind the court appearances are to find out what's in the best interests of the child, the 730 evaluation is also going to be trying to gather the information and provide a recommendation and analysis about what is in the child's best interest based on all the information that has been gathered and put into this report.
Okay, and Dawn, from a legal standpoint, what should parents know about requesting or undergoing a 730 evaluation?
Good question. So Dr. Shirin and Karen just told you what a 730 is.
Yeah.
A 730 is a court expert. So what parents should know is what a 730 is not. Okay. Dr. Shirin, when he's doing his work, he is not a therapist. Okay. He's also not a roving policeman that intervenes in disputes during the pendency of the evaluation, right? And he's not ultimately the judge. What he is he's a assistant to the court, so the court can make a very informed decision as to what's in the best interest of the children. And because he has the training and experience, he's going to conduct a very thorough investigation. And that means he's going to interview the parents, He's going to interview the children. He's going to interview the children with the parents. Most likely, he's going to contact collateral sources, psychological testing, and he's going to generate a very detailed report about what his findings are. He's going to go through it, and there's a specific procedure that people like Dr. Sharon have to follow. So the court is going to get information that it wouldn't get in an adversarial type of a relationship. You know, if two attorneys are advocating for their clients, which are not the kids, they're going to be maybe coloring the facts. This is going to be an independent, objective person that's going to look at things and then say, this is what I've found. And Dr. Sharon is able to get in there and say, okay, wait a minute, this is what the truth is, or I'm more inclined to find that this parent is more stable and things of that nature. So understanding what he's not is as important as understanding what he is.
I see.
Can I go off on a little bit of what he said?
Absolutely.
So most parents, when they get into court, they realize that the judge has got a lot of cases they have to go through during the period of the day. So, and most litigants that I've had an opportunity to talk to, which ones I'm doing custody evals, is they go, well, how come he didn't read this? And how come he didn't read that? Well, the judge has got a lot of factors to go through, and he's trying to make sure he has all that. So part of what I'm there to do is to outline exactly all of the facts that go on in this family. I tell them that I'm going to sit here and we're going to talk together, because you probably noticed I wasn't there when you were married to the guy. And so I want to know it through your eyes. I want to see it exactly through your eyes. So as many times as it's going to take to sit here and do that, that's what we're going to do. And how can I use those factors to be able to help make it so the strengths and weaknesses of both parents, so you can go raise those high functioning kids? Because eventually all of us professionals will be gone, and they're stuck still trying to figure out how to make this thing work. So part of what I do is I'm putting in things that they need to do to make it work.
Okay.
Could I add something?
Of course, please.
One of the things that the evaluator does as well is they actually talk to the children, and they talk to the children in both of the environments, the moms and the dads. And they look at things from the child's perspective. And the reason for that is because that you might have the mother say a certain fact pattern or scenario. You might have the father say a totally different fact pattern and scenario. And then you go to the child, and the child has got a totally different perspective on what's happening. And what's important is, like, sometimes the father will say, oh, I'm not saying anything negative about the mother in front of the child, or the father will say, I'm not doing this. But if the child perceives it that way, then it's happening. And that's when the parent needs to change their behavior, because that even if they're not intending to do something wrong, if the child's perceiving it that way, then there's something going on.
It's good thoughts, because I don't really think about it in terms of that, but I could see how that could play out, especially into the 730 evaluations. So, Dr. Sharon, let's talk about the emotional impact a divorce has on children, and what are some common behaviors parents should look for, and how can they address them?
Well, I'm going to back up a little bit. There are indexes that we have, tests that we have, that show where people are going to end up having accidents. And what it measures is what kind of life events have occurred in their life in the last 6 months. And if they come up to a high enough score, that means you're almost guaranteed they're going to have an accident of one kind or another soon. And what it happens is the life event of going through a divorce, whether you're an infant or you're a teenager, is earth-shattering. When you think about it, for kids, who are the two most important people in their life? Who do they role model from?
Their parents.
Exactly. And now all of a sudden, their parents are probably acting younger than the kids are, because they're now emotionally hurt. They figure someone's done them wrong, the other person that they've hung out with. And so what happens, the emotional impact on that depends on the age of the child, needless to say. Young children, what you're going to see is more of a regression of life things that go on. So you may have a child that's now soiling his pants as he goes to school. He may have behavioral problems. He, is throwing tempers. You're going to see meltdowns happening. You're going to see all kinds of things along those lines. The school's a great place for all those things to sort of happen sometimes. And then as they get older, you see they become more refined, where they start becoming more stubborn, they start developing bad habits to do things, and then they start trying to take sides. So that's kind of what I've seen just happens in emotional parts. That's why part of when I'm interviewing kids, I interview them after they've spent some time with parent A. I don't want them after they've been at parent B's house and 15 minutes later they're now at parent A's, they're still indoctrinated in being in the other one. I want to see them what their normal way of reacting to this parent is.
It's very perceptive.
I try.
Yeah.
And then to add to that too, not only has their whole world just now changed, a lot of times you have one or both of the parents saying something negative about the other parent. And so here's when Dr. Sheeran was saying the most important people to these children are their parents. Now all of a sudden they're getting bad mouthing of one parent toward of the other. And not only is that kind of destroying the relationship they have with that parent, it's also half of the child's identity. So you're basically kind of saying that there's something wrong with that child too.
And Karen, how can Minors Council help children feel heard and supported during these challenging times?
What I do as Minors Council is I have my initial conversations with them, and depending on their age, because that's going to determine how much they can comprehend of what I'm saying, I am as honest with them as I possibly can. And the reason for that is because as their advocate, they have to be able to trust me. I'm coming into their life, never been a part of their life before, and now all of a sudden they have to trust me. I want them to be able to tell me how they're feeling, tell me what they want, and I want them to be able to trust me and know that I'm going to advocate for them. But in the meantime, because children, they're still children. They don't have the capacity to make a lot of decisions. They can't just come to me and say, oh, I never want to go to school, or I want to go live with my mom, or I want to go live with my dad, because their reasons for wanting those particular things may not be in their best interest. And so when I'm talking and having my initial conversation with the child, I'm very honest. I explain my role. I explain what I'm there for with regard to them, to advocate for them. But I also inform, and I tell them I'm not going to destroy their confidentiality. I'm not going to say anything they don't want me to say, because they don't want any of the parents to be angry at them for saying something to me. But I also let them know what my limits are, because what my limits are and what the court's limits are. We're not going to do something just because the child asks for it if it's not in their best interests. That's hopefully the stability in this time of conflict and emotional turmoil, that they can trust me, and I'm going to do the very best I can for them and try and be honest with them.
I'd like to chime in on what she's talking. She's being very modest here, because see, she is highly trained at this point to be able to talk to kids, not in the way that we're talking as adults here, but so that she can build that trust with the child. Because here, picture, here's a child going to somebody's office, and it's now looks like an office. That doesn't look like home anymore.
Yeah.
And so now she's learned how to be able to take that environment and be able to break it down so the child feels comfortable in there because of the training and skill sets that she's developed. So she's being pretty modest about telling you about it.
And is there a certain age where a child could go to the court themselves and emancipate themselves, or?
What there is, and I'm glad you asked about that, because this is something that a lot of parents don't understand, or they don't have it correct. There is a statute that allows a child at the age of 14 to tell the judge what they want with regard to custody. Do I want to live with my mom? Do I want to live with my dad? But it's not an absolute. Just because the child at 14 says, I want to go live with this or that parent, it doesn't necessarily mean that's what's going to happen. They are given a voice, and the judge listens to that voice, but we still have to decide what's in the child's best interest. So yes, they have a voice, but it doesn't necessarily mean that's what's in their best interest.
Okay, and Dawn, from your perspective, how can the legal process be adjusted to minimize the emotional strain on the children?
So I think that the legal process in California, family court, has a real good feel for what's important. And what you find out when you're a divorce attorney like me is the number one thing that a court is concerned with is the children. Mm-hmm. Okay, we could talk about finances, we could talk about a lot of different things in divorce court, but children are primarily the focus of the court. And that's why we have 730 evaluators. That's why we have minors counsel, because the court understands that we're talking about children's lives and their development and their well-being. And so the court does do things that are child-focused. Let's start off with what the law says. The court says that the fundamental analysis starts with the well-being of the child, the health, welfare, and well-being of the child. But there's a policy in California that children have a need for both parents, right? And it's gender neutral. A lot of people think that, oh, isn't it true that only the mom has primary custody and the fathers don't? So there's a lot of built-in law to help courts take care of children. But what can parents do? Parents could go to parenting classes, and the courts could order that, right? And if they're honest with themselves and they really love their children, they're going to put their kids first. And yeah, nobody's perfect, and going through a divorce, a lot of times you're still very angry and hurt for a variety of reasons. But putting the child first is important, because as both of these experts stated, we're trying to help the kids. We're trying to help the kids develop in a way that is not impacted so much by the divorce. And the worst thing you can do for a kid, as far as I'm concerned, is to attack the other parent, because they feel that personally, right? And stuff. So it's about changing the thinking of people that are coming into family court angry, hurt, and not putting the children first. And so we got parenting classes, we got programs that are called things like Our Family Wizard or Talking Parents to help people communicate. There's a variety of things that could happen. But the divorce attorney also, not necessarily the minors counsel, not necessarily the evaluator, but the divorce attorney should be talking right from the beginning about what is really right for those kids, not exactly what you want, and stuff. So, I think that, it's about maturity. It's about focus. And if you want to be a decent parent and have a loving relationship with your children, treat them, like they're yours, rather than just a tool in or a piece of in a chess game.
Can I add to that real quickly?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because the thing is that when you go into divorce court, you've got you either have the parents represent themselves, or you have the attorneys represent the mother and the father. Minors counsel is appointed in a high conflict case when the judge determines that there's no one speaking for the child. We need to hear what's in the child's best interest. Because a lot of times, if you've got a case in divorce court where there's no minors counsel, you're going to hear about the advocate. You're going to hear the attorney advocate for the mother. You're going to hear the attorney advocate for the father, and what both of them want. But no one's talking for the child. And every once in a while, what ends up happening is maybe what mom wants is better for the child. Maybe what father wants is better for the child. But the judge is unable to know that. And so as appointing minors counsel, because my position, I'm not a neutral because I'm advocating for the child, but I'm neutral with regard to both parents. I don't have a confidential agreement with either parent, and I'm just there for the child. So I will represent what's best for the child, and that allows the judge to determine what is better. Because a lot of times you're going to hear one fact from the mom, one fact from the dad, and it's just not going to be any discussion all about what's best for the child.
And then how do you know if that's really true,
Right.
of what they're actually really saying?
Exactly.
And then here's just like another question I just had. What about if the child is a toddler, right, and doesn't really communicate as, a 5, 6, 7-year-old does? And, how would you handle situations when you have like a 2-year-old or 2.5 that's just, starting to become aware of emotions and, some words here and there? How do you handle a situation like that?
A lot of that, and that's when I reach out to my mental health, my mental health therapist, my colleagues with regard to that, and I'll talk to them about the stages of development for a child. Another thing that we do a lot of is what's called play therapy. And we call it play therapy because to the child, when a child is that young, they're playing, but the therapist is learning a lot about the child by watching them play. But I don't want any parents to think that they're paying a therapist a lot of money just to go out and play. It's not that. We just refer to it that way because that's the way the child, expresses himself, is through playing with the therapist. But it's directed at certain kinds of games or certain types of activities.
And what about the evaluation on that as well?
Well, 75% of all communication's nonverbal. That's only a small part verbal. So that's why you have to, I'm on the ground playing with little kids and doing all that kind of stuff. I'm seeing how they are interacting with each parent. How does a parent interact with them? How does the child interact with the siblings or the other that parent? And what are the dynamics that are going on? All that's something you can't see if like you're trying to do this on Zoom or something like that.
Yeah.
You have to be there in the house.
Physically.
And what is the the environment that they live in? Is it conducive for the child? And so that when you have the younger the child is, the more you have to pay attention to all that nonverbal cue. When you have teenagers who are refusing to talk, you have to deal with
Yeah.
what physical things that you're seeing, and how do you deal with that?
Yeah.
And how do you get them to come to the conclusion that they can talk to you and be able to get some sort of results out of it?
Gotcha.
Okay. When you're looking at like psychological testing, I'm trying to find out what their strengths are. I'm not trying to figure out what all their weaknesses are. If I'm doing neuropsychological testing, then I'm looking for what the weaknesses are and pounding down into those to come up with different things. But when you're having the kids like this, you're trying to find out how do they interact with that parent? How are they comfortable with them? Are they have one eye on the other parent sitting over there, or one eye on the door trying to figure out if they're going to be able to get out? You're trying to figure out all those little parts of it, so that I'm able to put that in a report, so that I can now be the eyes and ears of the judge, and they can be reading through the report instead of having to read through thousands of pages of documents
I see.
that may not give them that information.
Now, Dr. Shirin, what are some of the best practices for co-parenting to support their children and well-being to create a sense of stability?
Well, I want to go back to what one of the things that Don talked about is that I'm not a cop there to be handling all of their squabbles back and forth. I'm there to try. That's not what they're should be using the evaluator to do. So what I'm looking at, what they need to be doing is they need to be thinking about what's in their best interest with their child.
Yes.
They need to hang up that idea, I need a pound of flesh off that other person for whatever reason. They did them wrong in one form or another. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't, but that's the past, and we need to now move forward, because you can't hang your hat on that and be there forever.
No, you can't live in the past, because the past is not relevant to the future of the child.
Right. So what I'm looking at, what the parents, trying to teach parents to be able to do is thinking about what's in the child's best interest. Mm-hmm. No, the child's best interest is not for you to take the child and have the child never see the other party. Well, I'm the better parent. That's your opinion.
And Dawn, what legal tools are there available to ensure both parents are contributing to a supportive environment for their children?
Well, before I get into that, let me piggyback after what Dr. Shirin just said. And I think we should also look at this as a legal framework, as what is going on through the judge's eyes. When I consult with my clients, I try to get them to figure that out themselves, right? We already talked about the health, welfare, and safety of the child. If we can overcome that, what the court is going to look at is, are the parents co-parenting? And if not, which one is not co-parenting? And can we fix that somehow, right? Because co-parenting is it. And then the court has other practical considerations that a lot of times parents conveniently forget. Like, can you share 50-50 custody when dad's living in San Diego and mom's in Pasadena? And the child is 5 years old, or 6 years old and going to school. And there's practical considerations about work hours and things of that nature, and possibly some medical conditions that a child has where one parent is more skilled and educated as to how to deal with emergencies and how to treat a child and stuff. So there's a lot that the court's going to look at besides, the more, I would say, extensive inquiries that these two professionals are going to make. So, if I'm talking to my client and I want them to be successful in raising kids what I'm trying to do is also teach them to be a good parent. Now, I don't think I'm nearly as effective as Dr. Sheeran or some of the other people here, but I think that the family law attorney's ethical duty is to make the right calls, and it's really in the parents' best interest too, because when these kids get older, you want a relationship with them and you want them to thrive. And studies have shown, and Dr. Sheeran, I'm sure will support me on this, that a lot of children don't grow up as successful as they could be because of the damage that's caused. And so, if you look into the future, you're going to do the right thing. So I do believe that there's co-parenting classes that people can go to. I think that individual therapy is very important for people to get over the hurt of a divorce. I tell people that going through a divorce may be one of the most hurtful things that you could encounter in life, even more than a death of a family member, because it's just a stab in the heart, and it's something that people carry around, and there's feelings of anger and hurt, and just getting over that.
Resentment and
Yeah,
all this stuff.
all those things and stuff, and that carries into your parenting and stuff. So you taking care of yourself is really important too, and I know I sound silly when I tell this to my clients, but how about you taking some dance lessons, or start going back and taking some college classes like you always wanted to, because this could be great growth. I had a client recently say, yeah, but I don't have time for these things. I'm trying to be a parent and work 2 jobs at once. Yeah, that's true. But there's room for doing something else to help yourself, and certainly going to therapy and a counselor, surrounding yourself with loved ones, and then of course looking at the other side and trying to be empathetic, and so from a family law attorney's perspective, we should be steering them in those directions.
Dr. Sheeran, is
Yes.
there anything else you would like to
No, I think
final
they've
say
covered
of the show?
everything really well. It's,
Okay.
people lose sight of the kids in the process. And it's a shame that happens. But like Don did said, there are lots of other ones that don't do that. That they'll figure out how that, wait a minute, this is not worth the fight. I'm going to spend, I was talking to one of my colleagues just the other day, and this gentleman spent, I think it was $35 million in legal fees.
Oh my gosh.
He got an extra 3 hours of time. Okay, really? And then we're talking about another one that said, I'm going to spend all this money in legal fees. He took the money and put it in an account for the kids' college and said, no, that $1 million that I would spend in legal fees and all that, I'll put it over there. And they get along great.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice. Well, I like the second scenario.
I do too. Yeah.
I like when parents could coexist and amicable, especially for the child, to put the child's needs first. So thank you so much for being
Oh,
here
my
today
pleasure.
and sharing your expert insights. And thank you for joining us on this episode of Divorce Talk Show. I hope our expert panelists have provided valuable insights into navigating custody and supporting your family's well-being post-divorce. And remember, you're not alone, and resources are available to help. Visit divorcetalk.show to share your thoughts and submit topics for future episodes. See you next time.